let's start at the top. Top 8 national seeds right now. I think we have a much clearer picture than we did about a week ago of who belongs in that top 8. Maybe there's a spot or two up for grabs. Who are the teams that you kind of pencil in to that top 8 national seed conversation right now going into conference tournament week?
I'm curious what your answer is, and I was thinking about it a little bit in the lead up to the episode and then also last night and just doing the top 25, but I think that there are probably 5 or 6 locks. I lean towards 6 locks heading into conference tournament week, and in no order. I think it's Arkansas, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Texas, Auburn, and I'm at 5. And then I think North Carolina as well has cemented itself as a top 8 national seed. So that's 6 right there. You could very well make the argument for 7 with LSU. So I think that there is maybe a spot or two up for grabs this week. If Coastal Carolina goes on a run in the Sun Belt tournament and continues its dominance in that conference, they could very well play their way into a top 8 national seed. Like if Oregon, for example, does not win the Big Ten tournament, I think that is probably what needs to happen for someone like a Coastal to get in there. Oregon State is in a very interesting position because they're 6th in RPI, but obviously this year they're a Division I independent, so they're not a member of a conference. So their season until regionals begin is done. Again, they're in a great spot as far as RPI goes. I'll be curious to see whether or not that alone is enough with a lack of a conference tournament to get it in the top 8 national seed discussion. And then I think as far as teams on the outside looking in, Florida State could play its way into that last spot or last couple of spots with a deep run or an ACC tournament win. I think the same could be said for Clemson. So long-winded answer short, I've got probably 6 teams penciled in right now, but the last 2 spots could go a number of different ways. But I'm curious where you're at.
Oregon, for me, I think, is the weird one. I don't know how to evaluate where I stand on the Ducks. They won a share of the Big Ten, 22 conference wins in a weaker conference, 33rd strength of schedule. One thing that you and I have specifically griped over with Oregon throughout the course of the year is that they really haven't had a lot of prove-it opportunities. And granted, like they have handled business when they have had opportunities to play quality teams. But I don't know if their strength of schedule and associated metrics are in line with that of a top 8 national seed. Sometimes I do think that when it comes to college baseball, how you do in your conference tournament, how you do in terms of the regular season conference title can have a significant amount of influence. And for a team like Oregon, that could maybe be a saving grace. So I could see Oregon being in there. You mentioned Coastal Carolina. I really like that pick as well. I've kind of been bullish on them. I picked them to Omaha almost every week in 8 to Omaha, 4 conference losses. Is that the team that's going to go run through the Sun Belt tournament and win it? I would venture to say yes. And then maybe if you do that, also you kind of have that tournament regular season cachet on your resume that pushes you into the top 8. I still think it's on the outside looking in. LSU to me is the one that I think you mentioned them as a potential bubble for the top 8. I'd actually put them a little bit more towards the in than out. 19 conference wins in the SEC is a huge number. 42 total wins to end the regular season. Number 8 RPI. 13 quad 1 wins, 20 if you combine it with quad 2, with just 11 quad 1 and quad 2 losses, just 1 quad 2 loss specifically. I lean towards that team being a top 8 national seed. So I guess the moral of the story here is I actually don't think there's a lot of bubble action on the top 8 national front. I do think that we know roughly who the first 6, maybe 7, like you said, are. And then there are the Oregons and Coastals and LSU to a degree, Clemson maybe to a degree if they can really go wild in the ACC tournament. The one that's really interesting to me, and we've talked about them just kind of being this hottest team in the country lately, Florida is kind of a weird one to me. With the 13th RPI, I think that Florida would need to literally win the SEC tournament, and that would add 4 wins to your resume in the SEC, and the committee looks at those as just outright conference wins. So they're at 15 now. That puts you at 19, which is the number I just said for LSU. If you win the SEC tournament, you're probably a top 10 RPI team, somewhere between number 8 and number 9. So I look at Florida as probably that dark horse to maybe make some noise and not only just get into the hosting picture, but like really vault itself high up there in that. But yeah, I think I go back to the what was looking pretty murky in terms of who would be the top 8 to me has crystallized. The area that I don't know if I have as much clarity, at least in my head, as I kind of try and project here, is the number one national seed. I think that we have an idea of who that would be, and my quick answer would be Texas, just based on the fact that it had a historic season in the toughest conference in baseball. It still ranks towards the top of the RPI. I don't think that the current top teams in RPI above them, Georgia, Auburn, Vanderbilt, in that order, are number one overall seed caliber teams. Maybe Vanderbilt if you had to pick from that group. But Texas, to me, top 15 strength of schedule, 40 plus wins, a ridiculous 22 wins in the SEC, 21 total wins and just 10 losses between quad one and quad two. This to me is the number one overall seed, but it's not as convincing as I think we've seen in years past.
Yeah, I think as far as the number one overall seed goes, you can probably whittle it down to, at this point, 3 teams, 4 potentially, if you want to include Georgia in there. I think Arkansas is certainly in the mix. If it goes on a deep run in Hoover, certainly if it wins the SEC tournament, I think it earns the number one overall national seed. Same thing can be said for Vanderbilt. I think they fall into a very similar, if not identical, bucket to Arkansas as far as that's concerned. And then I think Texas right now is the leader in the clubhouse, just because, as you said, they're fresh off this historic regular season. From a program standard, they won the SEC regular season title. I think that, not necessarily by default, but just given how everything's shaken out this year, I think that puts them in pole position. But I think that there is some to be played for in the SEC tournament. Like I think Arkansas could very well end up as the number one overall seed. Vanderbilt, Georgia, I think would probably have to win the SEC tournament, which feels strange to say, just given they're number one in RPI. They've got a top 5 strength of schedule. The metrics with the Bulldogs are pretty dynamite. So I think that they're also right there in the mix, but they might have a little bit more work to do than some of the other teams. So it'll be a fun race. I think it's a fun subplot to the SEC tournament, which every year is always exciting with wild games, late starts, whatever. But I think the only thing I know about the number one overall national seed right now is it'll be an SEC team.